Hello, everybody. This is Maureen Bradley Anderson, and I am going to be talking to you today about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for First Year Seminar 107, The Joker and the Fool at Western Oregon University. Yay! Alrighty, so I will go ahead and tell you that this is one of my favorite all-time books. It is my comfort read, and when I am sad or angry or whatever feeling negative emotion, I will grab this book and read it because it is it is a breath of fresh air, and it makes me feel better about the world, even though it spends all its time criticizing the world. So I made you all watch the first 3 episodes, we'll go back to this slide, of the 6-part BBC miniseries from 1982. And the history of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is that it started, Douglas Adams is the writer, it started as a radio program, and then it moved on to a TV program, not this one. I think that's right. And then he wrote the novel, and then this Hitchhiker's Guide came, and then there was an actual movie of it that was made a few years ago, and but that was after Douglas Adams had died. And there are 4 or maybe 5 books, depending on the account, in the trilogy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It is science fiction, absolutely, but it's also humorous science fiction, and it is a satire. So let me use some of these words here, define some of these words, because you might hear satire, you might hear farce, you might hear a lot of different things about different kinds of comedy, and we haven't defined those yet. Well, a satire is a comedy that uses humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues. A lot of what we're talking about in this class is satire. Saturday Night Live is satire. South Park is satire. Many of the stand-up comedians use satire. The talk show hosts use satire. Is a way of exposing the like it says, the stupidity and the vices of the world. And this book, H2G2, is an abbreviation for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is a satire. It is quite a biting satire, and it's particular to British politics and life, but it can be spread out over to most of Western civilization and possibly the entire world. A farce is like a satire, but coarser. It's a comic dramatic work using buffoonery and horseplay, and typically including crude characterizations and ludicrously improbable situations. So with the ludicrously improbable situations, you could argue that Hitchhiker's Guide is also a farce. Crude characterizations, I would say the Vogons being bureaucrats, definitely that is crude, but they also mean crude as in uncouth, taboo, raunchy, that kind of humor. And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is not. Despite talking about the 3-breasted whore of wherever she's from, it's not a crude book. I read it to my kids. And it doesn't have quite the buffoonery or horseplay that a farce typically has. South Park is a lot more farcical. They can get away with it. It's a cartoon. And they're also South Park, so they show it after 10, and it's gross and crude and awful. But it is also biting satire. I think a farce is also not always used to criticize. A lot of times farces are just used to make fun. Does that make sense? There's a difference. So Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy punches up, but that's the other reason I love this book. There's nothing really that we laugh down at. Not really. Everyone we laugh down at is like president of the universe. So, but there's a link to a brief, really kind of neat article about Hitchhiker's Guide galaxy, and an economist who read it, and it was like, oh, well, that makes me understand so many different things. But some of the things that this satire punches up at, number one is humanity's belief in its own brilliance, because not only are dolphins smarter than us in this book, but so are the mice. And if you haven't watched the last two episodes, you might as well. If you got to the end of the last episode, you know the mice are the ones that built the Earth. Um, but this feeling that human beings are somehow special and not, just descended from apes, as the Hitchhiker's Guide keeps pointing out, it's central to humanity. We're special somehow, but in this book, we're not. In this book, not only are we not the smartest critters in the galaxy, we're not even the smartest critters on Earth. It also punches up with religious and philosophical debates, with all of those books by, let me see if I can find his, no, I can't. Let me see if I can find it. The name of the guy who wrote the books, no, but there is a number of books with it. What God got wrong? Who is this God guy anyway? But there's a lovely little bit in the second episode where they're talking about the Babel fish, aptly named because the Tower of Babel was God's punishment. Well, no, people built the tower to try to get up to God, a whole stairway to heaven thing, and God punished them by making it so they all spoke different languages, so they could not work together anymore. So the Babel fish was a clever piece of sophistry because they used it to prove that there is no God, because the idea goes that if God says, I am making it so that you cannot prove that I exist. But this Babel fish, which is evolved all by itself in a manner so that it is extremely useful and eats brainwaves and translates things perfectly, then man says, well, you invented the Babel fish obviously could not have evolved all by itself, so therefore it proves your existence, so therefore you can't exist. And God's like, oh, I didn't think of that, and pops out of existence, so therefore God doesn't exist. That's just punching up at religious and philosophical debates and how silly they are sometimes. Bureaucracy, all Vogons is a send up of bureaucracy and people who are about the silly rules, right? So they're a race that would not save their grandmothers from the swamp beast without orders, signed interpret sentence, sent back, queried, lost, found, subject to public inquiry, lost again, finally buried in soft peat for 3 months and recycled as fire lighters. It's bureaucracy. I have to do all of these things in order to save my grandma. Just like at the beginning, Arthur Dent was looking for the plans that were on the public display, but they were in a locked bathroom in a basement that had no stairs with a sign on it that says "Beware of the leopard." That's bureaucracy for you. And then one of my favorite bits, being a bit of a literary critic myself, is the fact that Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent lie through their teeth with big meaningless words to complement the Vogon poetry. None of those words they said, made sense when it came to the poetry, and sometimes it just feels like a lot of literary criticism is a bunch of big words strung together that don't make any sense. And this is my genre. This is what I do for a living, and a lot of times I'm like, wow, it has utterly meaninglessly put those words together. We can go on and talk about conspicuous consumption. I mean, if a Bibelbrox has a second head and a third arm, just because he can afford it. People built entire planets because they could. So this is this criticism of conspicuous consumption. It's also a criticism of inequality because, oh my God, people can build planets. And they kind of crashed the economy. And, there's people who can't eat, and then there's people who can afford to build a planet. So all of these things are things that this book criticizes in humor, in such a way that we laugh at it, and in such a way that we don't feel like we're punching down at anybody. A couple of things. I think I'm going to have us talk about these in class, but I'm going to touch on them a little bit. It's also, the whole book is just a satire on on space dramas, which were at the time, incredibly popular. They're still incredibly popular. There's how many space shows on TV right now? But when they talk about the science in the space shows, there's a lot of hand waving. It's like dilithium crystals, and they're like, yeah, they're like powerful and make warp fields, and yeah, so it's improbable any of this stuff works. So we have an improbability drive, and we have encyclopedias, these things that have all the knowledge in them, but the knowledge is like sparse. And we're going to talk a little bit about Wikipedia and how this works. How this might have changed things, but at the same time, yeah, Wikipedia. Didn't you love their electronic book? How it was the shape and size of a brick. and, but in 1982, that was pretty wild technology. So I'm going to let's also talk a little bit about character types and archetypes. That was the other bit, the other thing that we talked about today, was the 6 weirdly specific characters that are always in every sitcom. Arthur Dent is our straight man, but he's also our fish out of water. So all the crazy stuff that happens around, he reacts to, but he's also just the guy that we relate to. So once again, O'Shannon's right that beware lists, because they make it seem like these people are these characters are only one thing. But even in this list, in Clay's list of the 6 characters, Joey Tribbiani shows up in the idiot list and in the horn dog list. So Arthur Dent is our straight man, and he's our fish out of water. Ford Prefect. By the way, that's a name of a car in Britain. It'd be like someone was named Toyota Camry in this country, right? It's supposed to be really silly. It took me years to figure that out. Yeah. Anyway, he's a straight man also, but he's kind of a tour guide, right? Dante's Inferno, sort of. I think it's Dante's Inferno. I get that mixed up with the other one where they go to the 7 layers of hell. Anyway, he's a tour guide. He's someone who's showing this fish out of water around. Zaphod Beeblebrox is an idiot. He's the idiot that's in charge of the entire universe. But he is the idiot. And then Marvin the robot is that depressed guy. And he's kind of brilliantly put together. And then for a discussion question, I'm going to have us look at Marvin. Marvin the depressed robot, because he's depressed, and we shouldn't laugh at depressed people. That's a terrible thing, but he's a robot. And then I also want to talk about Trillian. What's her archetype? And then I want to know if her portrayal in that TV show was punching up or not. So thank you very much for listening, and have a nice day.